In the world of high-stakes finance, few stories are as audacious and bewildering as that of Emmanuel Nwude, a Nigerian businessman who orchestrated one of the largest bank frauds in history. With a scheme so elaborate it could rival a Hollywood script, Nwude defrauded a Brazilian bank of $242 million, all under the guise of building a phantom airport in Nigeria. This tale of ambition, deception, and the supernatural allure of wealth serves as both a cautionary tale and a gripping narrative of human folly. Emmanuel Nwude was born in Nigeria in 1964, a country rich in resources, yet plagued by economic challenges. Growing up, Nwude displayed an entrepreneurial spirit that set him apart from his peers. After completing his studies at the University of Lagos, he ventured into real estate industry ripe for profit amid Nigeria's urbanization. The bustling markets and emerging cities of Nigeria provided fertile ground for Nwude's ambitions. He quickly made a name for himself, known for his charm and charisma. He had this ability to make people believe in his vision, no matter how outlandish it was. His networking skills were exceptional. He connected with influential figures, securing investments and partnerships that would propel him further up the ladder. Nwude's career took a significant turn when he became a director at Union Bank of Nigeria. In this role, he gained invaluable experience and insights into the banking sector, which would later aid him in executing his grand scheme. The position not only elevated his status, but also provided him with connections and knowledge about financial transactions, lending processes, and the vulnerabilities within the banking system. In 1995, Nwude devised a plan that would change everything. He convinced Nelson Sakaguchi, the director of Banco Noroeste, a Brazilian bank, that he was impersonating Paul Ogwuma, the governor of the Central Bank of Nigeria, CBN. Under this guise, he presented himself as a legitimate businessman planning to build an international airport in Nigeria's capital, Abuja project that promised astronomical returns and the potential to revolutionize trade and tourism in West Africa. But there was one catch: he needed funding. To execute this elaborate ruse, Nwude enlisted the help of several accomplices: Emmanuel Nwude, Nzeribe Okoli, Obum Osakwe, and the husband and wife duo Christian Ikechukwu Anajemba and Amaka Anajemba. Each played a crucial role in the deception. Offalu and Okoli helped create false documentation and contracts to support Nwude's claims, while Osakwe assisted in laundering the funds that flowed from Banco Noroeste. The Anajembas were instrumental in managing communications and furthering the illusion of legitimacy surrounding the airport project. Nwude presented himself as an established businessman with deep pockets. He showcased documents, contracts, and blueprints that appeared legitimate, all designed to convince Sakaguchi of his credibility. The promise of returns was too good to ignore. They were entranced by the idea of investing in something groundbreaking. As funds began to flow into Nwude's accounts, he orchestrated a series of transactions that would ultimately defraud Banco Noroeste of $242 million, $191 million in cash, and the remainder in outstanding interest. The money flowed like water-lavish lifestyles funded by ill-gotten gains. Luxury cars, extravagant parties, and high-end properties became symbols of Nwude's newfound wealth, while the airport remained nothing but a mirage. As the dust began to settle on Nwude's grand scheme, cracks in his story started to appear. The scam came to light when Banco Santander, a Spanish multinational financial services company, attempted to acquire Banco Noroeste. But before the sale can go through, it wants an explanation of the very high balances in the accounts for offshore deposits of foreign currency. Looking into the matter, Banco Noroeste finds a discrepancy between the account through which the transactions between its Cayman Islands branch and the bank were conducted, and the amount of international transactions recorded in the account held at head office. Nelson Sakaguchi, head of the bank's Cayman Island branch, is recalled from his holiday for questioning. Initially, he says he lost between $9 million and $12 million in currency trades. Later, he admits he invested the bank's money in an airport construction project in Nigeria, whose profits are expected shortly. To cover up some 94 unauthorized wire transfers to 17 different recipients which were made to Emmanuel Nwude and his team, Nelson recruited 2 other branch employees to help manipulate the bank's books. When they realized the transfers were illegal, it is alleged they used this knowledge to steal money from the bank for their own purposes. Investigators initially believed Sakaguchi had stolen the money and invented the Nigerian airport investment story to cover himself. But as the investigations continued, it became clear he was actually the victim of an elaborate scam that had started with a single fax. According to the statement Nelson Sakaguchi gave to investigators from Nigeria's Economic and Financial Crimes Commission, EFCC, in March 1995, he received a fax inviting him to engage in a business transaction involving an airport project in Nigeria. He responded to this invitation and travelled to London to meet with the persons he believed had sent the fax. He met with Emmanuel Nwude and his crew in London. During the meeting, each member introduced themselves confidently, and Nelson believed their assurances. Emmanuel emphasised the need for confidentiality and mentioned that construction wouldn't start for another 4 to 5 years. Nelson informed him that the bank was ready to transfer funds when they were prepared to begin. However, Emmanuel insisted they needed the money immediately for planning and hiring contractors. Nelson started to feel uneasy, but Emmanuel reassured him that they had other investors lined up, which made Nelson anxious about missing out on a significant opportunity. Despite Nelson's concerns about his bank's management approving the investment, Emmanuel downplayed it and offered him a $10 million commission if he could resolve the issue himself. This incentive swayed Nelson, and he agreed to proceed with a $242 million investment. Before they wrapped up, Emmanuel persuaded Nelson to transfer a $3 million deposit as a sign of his commitment. Between May and June 1995, Nelson Sakaguchi sent the sum of $4.65 million to Nigeria in 7 installments. Nelson was now in the palm of their hands. Nelson Sakaguchi continued to send money in response to telephone calls and faxes for the next 3 years, sending over $190 million before, in February 1998. He was suspended from the bank and eventually dismissed. But it didn't end there. After Sakaguchi was suspended by the bank, a further $250,000 was deposited into one of the accounts used by Emmanuel Nwude in Nigeria. Nelson Sakaguchi was persuaded to hand over his own money, this time after being convinced that a further $1 million would enable the money, now inflated to over $400 million as a result of accrued interest, to be finally sent to Brazil. Despite the fraud, Banco Santander acquired Banco Noroeste, but on the condition that the bank's owners deducted an amount equivalent to the stolen money and repaid that sum to Banco Santander. After this had been done, the former shareholders of Banco Noroeste decided to try to get their money back. They engaged William Ritchie, a Miami lawyer, to lead a tracing and recovery effort. A multinational criminal investigation team, uniting authorities from Brazil, Britain, Nigeria, Switzerland, and the United States, led to the conviction of 2 of the fraudsters and the wife of the third by a Nigerian court, to the tracing of $184,275,000, and to the recovery by civil and criminal proceedings in the United States, Switzerland, England, Hong Kong, and Nigeria of a total of approximately $138 million. $94.5 million of this was recovered from assets in Nigeria, and recovery efforts continue in Nigeria and Switzerland. First, a team of forensic accountants pieced together financial transactions from more than 300 bank accounts in many different countries. The breakthrough in the investigation occurred when the Banco Noroeste were able to use material uncovered in Switzerland, the jurisdiction to which much of the stolen money was sent. A criminal complaint was lodged in Geneva, and monies in an account beneficially owned by Nwude were frozen. These monies, approximately $5 million, were released to Banco Noroeste as part of a settlement entered into by Nwude. However, in addition to the freezing of the money, the claimants also gained access to other documentation that led to the discovery of the path through which other stolen money found its way to Anajemba and Nwude. The Nigerian legal firm of Safunda, Asakwe, Ogundipa, and Belgore was initially tasked by investigators to obtain information about Anajemba and Nwude, so as to ascertain what assets they controlled and where such assets were located. One of the most interesting things investigators did was to assist in securing the compliance of Nigerian banks with disclosure orders made by the High Court in London. Investigators served orders for the banks to provide detailed information about accounts controlled by Anajemba and Nwude, and about transactions undertaken through those accounts. None of these orders could be enforced directly in Nigeria because they did not meet the criteria set out in the statutes. To overcome this, investigators wrote to the banks and threatened that if they failed to comply with the disclosure orders, the orders would be enforced in Nigeria by proceeding against accounts held by them in correspondent banks in the United Kingdom. As all these banks had accounts with banks in London, they decided to comply with the orders rather than risk having their businesses disrupted. These discoveries enabled further tracing to take place. The immediate response from Emmanuel Nwude and Mrs. Anajemba was to bribe senior EFCC officials. But their attempts were recorded on audio and video, and both Nwude and Anajemba and their lawyers, who had delivered the bribes, were prosecuted for bribery. Cooperating with the EFCC, investigators provided information and material that was used during the successful prosecution of Nzeribe Okoli, Emmanuel Nwude and Mrs. Anajemba. In June 2005, Mrs. Anajemba agreed to pay a total of $48 million in restitution to Banco Noroeste. To date, investigators have recovered $20 million of this sum, which has been paid to Banco Noroeste, and they had control over other of her assets, sufficient to ensure that the total sum of $48 million is recovered. Having seen Anajemba plead guilty, Emmanuel Nwude then approached investigators for a similar resolution. He agreed to pay $120 million in restitution. He signed the agreement, pleaded guilty in November 2005, and received a 25-year sentence and a 12-year sentence for Nzeribe Okoli. The sale of Nwude's assets in Nigeria has yielded approximately $84 million, whilst a further sum of $12 million has been recovered in Switzerland, California, and London. Even after serving time, Nwude remained a controversial figure in both countries. His name became synonymous with greed and deception. Discussions about him often elicited strong reactions from those affected by his actions. In 2006, after serving time for his crimes, he filed a lawsuit seeking to recover some assets he claimed had been acquired prior to his offences, ultimately recovering $52 million worth of assets. In 2021, he reportedly claimed that he was unaware of the $242 million airport scam, and alleged that his legal team pressured him into pleading guilty 2 decades earlier. Some viewed him as a cautionary tale man who let ambition cloud his judgment until it consumed him entirely. Others saw him as an embodiment of the darker side of human natura, reminder that greed can lead even the most astute minds down treacherous paths. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed this story, please like and subscribe for more true crime and horror stories.